Hi everybody. Welcome. We're going to start. I'm Nick Simchikareze. Do I have to use a microphone? It's like echoing everywhere. You know what? No? Do I have to use a microphone? Yeah. I'm Nick Simchikareze. I'm Chair of History and Theory here at the AA. I'm delighted to welcome you all to give the kind of introduction for the event. So I've been asked to say a quick thing about the broader theme for this term's public program, which is organized around our new lab structure that we're setting up at the AA. So this specific term is organized around Action Lab. So one of four sort of horizontal strands for debate and discussion throughout the AA's entire educational and research and practice ecosystem to draw people together. The others are future things of relative value, looking at world building in the distant future, past things of relative value, looking at preservation and how we interact with the past today, and finally a land lab, looking at the earth around us. So what is the principle around this sort of lab structure? Well, to quote Karl Marx from the Communist Manifesto, the greatest bees sort of embarrass the best architects in their ability sometimes to create honeycombs. But what differentiates the sort of best bee from the worst of architects, or what makes the worst of architects better than the best of bees, is the capacity to imagine a structure before realizing it in the earth or in reality. So it's a terrible, terrible quote, but more or less you got the gist. So the lab's organized on the principle, I think, at least the way I see it, that architecture is effectively a process of moving things along a chain from the impossible to the possible, to the plausible, to the real. But I'd like to suggest that Action Lab is that final link in the chain, moving from the plausible to the real. So there's something about the slowness of architecture, the messiness and the contingency of architecture that is fundamental for understanding of action here, right? It reveals that we are all interlinked, that we are relational, that we are contingent, that we have to all engage with each other no matter what. And so as an initial proposition for Action Lab, and really the point of this event and this whole public program is to define what that lab is actually asking, right? We don't pretend to have the answer, we're here to elevate questions. Is how can the slowness of architecture actually reveal its true power and potential, in the sense that it maps onto the slowness of actual culture building itself. So in a time when information and misinformation move so quickly, perhaps there's something in the gradual nature of building that actually reveals how messy our cultures are, our intrinsic connections are, and therefore reveals the moments of capacity to actually change them. From the point of view of scholarship and history and theory at the AA, I think we're also confronting the idea of what is criticality. Okay, what's I think really important in an era of so much information, misinformation, of supposed culture wars, of disinformation, is how can one be critical? How can one reveal the structures of power that seem to stand in the way of change without losing hope or without losing a sense of possible action, right? So how can we have a constructive critique, okay? So we think of knowledge and Action Lab as a kind of cleaning of the leaves from the path of knowledge, as a tidying of the room to allow one to design and to imagine, and not as a crowding of jargon and terms to get in the way of design. In this sense, we hope that theory and design can really become compatible in Action Lab. So welcome on this journey of redefining what the word action is. I think we're really, really lucky to have people who are answering and working on these questions and answering them in every single day here today with us. I'm just very, very delighted to be part of the conversation. So thank you for coming to help us answer this question of what is action and what is architectural action today. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Nick. And thank you all who have come this evening. It's really nice to see some familiar faces, those who joined us last week. And I wanted to thank our invited speakers for coming this evening. Loraine, Leeson, Tom Keene, Aysen Dennis, and Alessia Gammarota for agreeing to speak. And thank you to the AA for hosting two of our evening sessions that have allowed us to debate the current state of affairs of public consultation in the UK and London specifically this evening. My name is Louise Staunton. I am a curator and I'm currently a research fellow at the Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art and Teesside University. I'm also a tutor here with Julika, and my expanded research really looks at the intersection of art, politics, and housing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Julika Gittner. I'm an artist and an architect, and I'm also a researcher at the moment in Potsdam. And I've been looking at the role of architecture and art in regeneration for as much as I can remember through my practice in teaching and research. We're really glad that the AA is hosting these two sessions, because this is an area that we've looked at for a long time and that we're looking at currently with our students here, and that we feel is really, this is really the right place to do that, because we feel that the people in the room are either people who are already influencing how consultation is being practiced, or will be in the future when they leave this place and affect the world of architecture. So thank you for hosting us.
So these two events that have gone across last week and this week. Last week was really thinking about the infrastructures of public consultation and bringing together artists, designers, activists, curators and legal professionals. We want to think about how we together can both look at the dysfunction of public consultation, but how can we together transform how the public engages in the decision-making processes. So this evening, Julika and I will give as brief an intro as we can. Those of you who were here last week, it'll pretty much be the same thing, but it's to define the terms that we're talking about, what we mean by consultation. And really, it's the bare bones of what we've been teaching in our history and theory class. And then Loraine will kick us off, followed by Tom, and then Aysen and Alessia will be talking about the Aylesbury Estate. And what we would really like to encourage, and I'm going to be strict with time, is to encourage a discussion afterwards and to really be thinking about the past, how it might be able to inform present campaigns, and to ask you guys questions directly to help to contribute to the discussion.
I think everybody is aware that the idea of consultation has become very mainstream. It's statutory for many planning processes. There's lots of really nice words kicking about: collaboration, co-design, community engagement. All of these things are very kind of everywhere and talked about. But in the last in the last 20 years of urban regeneration in London, I think it's clear to most people that the experience on the other end of that very nice sounding set of words is very different. So we collected some here, listening to no end, tick box exercise. These are all terms and things that we've heard expressed from people who feel very much that they're not actually being engaged with or consulted.
But missing off of that list, like we missed off last time, and that I think that Tom and Aysen can speak to definitely, is consultation fatigue. In this country in particular, consultation is part of decision-making processes, not just in planning, but across government and public activity. And while at its base, the idea is democratic, to ask people what it is that they want, but when it's taking place at every turn, and actually no one is listening or affecting change in response to that consultation, we are becoming fatigued and fed up and perhaps no longer engaging.
And I think what's very clear is that this system is working very well for the people in power. I mean, on the left is a funny cartoon, but on the right is a chart about the social housing estate ballot process, in which every estate that has gone under a ballot has voted yes. So the manufacturing of consent, as many people will call it, is working extremely well. So consultation has become a tool for producing a particular desired outcome. So even despite kind of good intentions in some ways. I mean, in 2018, the ballot system was installed to try and capture some of the views and opinions of people, which seemed like a very positive move. And the mayor published the guide, a kind of good practice guide. Within 4 years, from within City Hall itself, there was a
Before
report,
we go into that, I think that it would be really important to explain that for those of you who don't know, the balloting process was something that was instituted in 2018 by Sadiq Khan, and it was applauded and ushered in. It was a law that required any housing estate, if it was to be demolished or proposed that it was to be demolished and then rebuilt, that the residents living in that estate had a vote on whether indeed they wanted it to be demolished and for them to be rehoused, or whether they wanted to stay there and have it refurbished. It's a yes or no vote. The winner, or rather, if the applicant, so if the developer or the council wins that vote, that means that they can then access funds for redevelopment from the Mayor of London. But then, as you were going to say? But interesting that Nick raised this point of how things then become actioned or implemented. So within 4 years of it actually running, from within City Hall itself came a report by Sean Barry, which really very clearly highlighted with very many case studies that it wasn't working at all for the residents, and it was being very used in a very manipulative manner. So we've looked at the sort of history in our teaching as well of very progressive ideas becoming sort of changed and overused and watered down and warped in really bizarre ways. And I think we have the hope, and this is also why we want to get you together and have you here, that there is a way of recapturing some of the really progressive ethos of what was initially thought about as ideas around participation. I mean, the idea of consultation, and we both have a preoccupation with community consultation, but really it came for me from the radical history that consultation has, that it emerged out of the civil rights movement in the United States and a push for radical democracy, participatory democracy. And it was the idea that citizens could take charge of political decision making, or rather not take charge, but to actively be involved, to have an active citizenry. And yes, as Julika says, that it's been sort of watered down as it's gone through different statutory systems and machinery.
And I think the focus for us for these two events is obviously to think about the role of culture or cultures, and we don't just mean art. I mean, last week we had a lawyer here, so that's also part of the culture of people who are trying to sort of change that system and how we do it differently. I think it's very important to be critical and aware of the compromised role that particularly art sometimes has in relation to regeneration, in relation to consultation processes, how artists have been used to kind of, art wash or nicify, it's not a real word, but beautify processes which are actually fairly brutal. So there's also something to be critical of. But then, there's obviously amazing practices, and we're really happy to have you here and just start the event off. Talking about, artists resisting certain forms of consultation, contributing completely different ways of doing it, and really, producing an alternative route into that sort of two-way conversation, which is very exciting.
Our next slide is just before I introduce our speakers fully. For those of you who weren't here last week, very briefly, I mean, you mentioned Saskia O'Hara is with the Public Interest Law Centre. Jesko Fezer, maybe you can...
Is a professor at Hamburg for experimental design and has set up a public design agency that is free of charge, available for anybody in the area to access if they have any design questions, whether they're related to urban space or even private design problems. So it's a fantastic bit of infrastructure that he's set up and that is continuing. work.
And what is really interesting as well at the end of his talk, if you can go onto YouTube and watch last week's event, he speaks of a typology of designer, the different kinds of designers and their relationship with engagement, participation, and I suppose the autonomy of the user or the service user and their relationship with the designer. And of course Julika presented, and I think that it's really important to look at her work and think about her work in this discussion about culture and consultation. So before Loraine, I just wanted to introduce everyone ahead of time. Loraine Leeson is a visual artist whose research focuses on the role of art in social and environmental change through bringing community-based knowledge into the public domain. I probably won't introduce her work because you'll be introducing it for us. Tom Keene is an artist, educator, researcher, programmer, and activist. His artist and activist-led research investigates the role of marginal and often obscure technological objects. And Aysen is a resident and campaigner who has been fighting against the demolition of Aylesbury Estate in London for over 20 years. She's organised numerous campaigns, protests, and an exhibition in her flat shortly before her eviction in 2024, which I hope she'll be speaking to us about, or Alessia will be speaking about that exhibition as well. Alessia is an Italian photographer, and with the Fight for Aylesbury campaign, she worked with residents and supporters of the Aylesbury Estate on an exhibition in Aysen's flat. So Loraine, great to have you. Your presentation is...
Thanks very much. Well, it's a pleasure to come and talk about this. It's been a while since we did this. In the area we call Docklands now is quite a substantial area of land. It stretches for 9 square miles east of Tower Bridge. And it's not like some of the other dockland areas in the country, which are mainly just along where the actual docks are. This includes large areas where people live and work. In 1979, the Thatcher government got in, and they saw this area of land that was in need of regeneration. We didn't use the term regeneration, redevelopment was the term. And nobody doubted that. The residents there really needed it to be developed because since the 60s onwards, the ships had been docking further downriver because of containerisation. They were larger ships, and so they weren't using the docks so much. On the other hand, the warehouses were being reused for small businesses, artist studios, so that it wasn't empty, and people were living there, just as many people were living there as ever before. But the Thatcher government saw this, and they described it as the biggest bit of real estate in Europe, and they brought around about a change in the law that enabled it to be able to be sold off to developers. So they took it out of the hands of local authorities who had themselves been working with residents and the local councils to come up with plans for what should happen. They all got thrown out, and they proceeded, and they set up the London Docklands Development Corporation, only the second development corporation in the country, which then became a model for how you develop, how you take land away from people and develop it, only answerable to central government. The people in Docklands are from those communities who have settled there over generations, come in through with the ships. It's the working class area of London, it's the industrial area of London. People have been poor for generations. So they knew how to organise, it was the only way to survive. And when these plans came in to redevelop the land, they very quickly organised themselves into federated groups in each area. So it wasn't one, as I say, it was only called the Docklands afterwards, but Wapping, Isle of Dogs, North Southwark, Woolwich and Silvertown, they were all different areas, and they each had their action groups. And I had been working as an artist with another artist, Peter Dunn. We'd been working with trades unions in East London, producing posters around health issues. And we'd learnt really how to engage with people, how to get ideas out on the streets. So when all this happened, we were approached by some of the campaigners in the Docklands area to say, could we do a poster about what was going on? It was so big. They felt it needed to be explained. People in the areas didn't even know what was happening in their own locations. And so because these groups were all federated into different larger groups, we were able to go to each different area and ask them what sort of poster they wanted. And they just said, we want big ones. You know, this is a huge issue. It's no point just doing some little posters. Let's have big posters. And they also said, well, we also need to communicate these issues in a bit more depth because obviously they're very complex. We also need help with our campaigns, and we need it all documented as well, because it's only the media at the moment who are documenting everything, and therefore we are being misrepresented. There was no money. And we had no idea how to do big posters, but we were very inventive, and so we went to the local Tower Hamlets was one of the areas that had a very radical arts committee. We went to them and asked if we could have some materials, and then and we went to the Regional Arts Association, and they gave us a part-time 6-month residency between two of us. I mean, you couldn't do that now. In fact, you couldn't do any of it now in terms of funding. But the key point to this was that although we had the most right-wing government that the country has ever had, still, in fact, the government for London, the Greater London Council, went Labour, and then it went left Labour, headed by Ken Livingstone. And we went to them and we said, could you give us some money to build a billboard site? We didn't want to use advertising billboards because they're sited for passing cars. These needed to be, you know, somewhere sited where community members could see it. And they said, why do you only want one? Why do we only want one? I mean, again, who would say that now? But, you know, the GLC had an attitude very much like Jeremy Corbyn's approach, which was like, you don't necessarily do things from the top down, you fund from the bottom up. So they had no planning legislation in Docklands, but what they could do is they could fund all the different groups who were trying to make a difference. So they funded, initially, one site, and eventually, over a period of 10 years, there were 8 different sites in different locations. We didn't know how to do it. We invented a way of you couldn't print big billboard-sized posters. It was too expensive, and you couldn't do it in colour. Would have to do hundreds to make it cost-effective. It was impossible. So we were used to working in photo montage. We made the images, and they were blown up in sections with a large format camera, and then they were printed at 3 foot by 4 foot and mounted onto wooden panels, hand-coloured, varnished, in not yacht varnish, and then we went up the ladders and screwed them onto the backing board. I have to say I'm afraid I never went up the ladder. That person you can see at the bottom, we were able to hire people at this point because of the GLC funding us. That's Sonia Boyce in her first job. So we had a team. We were not very well paid, but we had a team. Most importantly, though, what we had was a steering group. Now, we'd learnt this from the work we'd done with the trades union. We'd learnt that process of collaboration, and that you can work with a group who all bring their different expertise and don't try and tell each other what to do. So once a month, representatives from all these federated groups in the Docklands would come to the Docklands Community Poster Project, we had some premises in the Cannon workshops, which are still there. And then they would talk about the issues that needed to be addressed. And then we would go away and find ways to represent them. And then we'd talk about the images, not in terms of what they looked like. They didn't tell us how they should look. Because other artists would say to us, well, isn't it like design by committee, the lowest common denominator? In fact, it wasn't. It was completely the opposite. It was incredibly stimulating because you were working with people who were really passionate about what they were doing and they really knew their stuff. And we knew our stuff. And so we actually shared our expertise, and it was the most stimulating way of working that I've ever come across. Oh my goodness, I've got to run through it now. So we went through a whole series of panels. We realised because we were changing them that we could change them gradually because they were going from site to site. We also picked up ideas from meetings when, for example, somebody said, big money's moving and pushing out local people. That was clearly going to be a caption. And then people said they're going to be throwing us onto the scrap heap. So we took off the bottom, we got more inventive about how we changed them. We took off the bottom rows of panels and then we replaced those, so you're going down the abyss. And then people said, but we're not on the abyss. We're not on the scrap heap. So the next one showed that it was a developer's design. Then we got even more inventive. These were up for several months, and we couldn't do it all in advance. We were following the campaign, and actually it was becoming more proactive. So at some point, people were putting forward their own ideas for the area. And this one was actually where we literally changed the image on the site. I can't go into it now, there isn't time, but you can see in the inset there that we screwed other things onto the image, and it ended into a sort of a history painting equivalent of putting the people on their land, as you would in a history painting, putting people in their land. We did other sequences. This was one on housing, which dealt with the history of housing. We also supported initiatives that were going on in the community, such as the People's Plan for the Royal Docks. A really significant document was headed up by Newham Docklands Forum, supported by the GLC's Popular Planning Unit. We produced posters, exhibitions, another photo mural. These are some of the exhibitions. We documented what was going on, and that's the only record that's being held in the Museum of London Docklands from the community's point of view of what happened in those years. And then we supported other events that were happening, like the People's Armadas to Parliament, where this was coordinated by the Joint Docklands Action Group, which represented all those smaller groups. And somebody said they wanted to take a petition to Parliament. And then somebody else said, but we're on the river and they're on the river, why don't we take it on the river? And that was the first Armada to Parliament. We produced the banners. We worked with all the arts groups in the area on the banners and all the ephemera, and then the GLC gave us Jubilee Gardens, and so we had something between a rally and a political campaign there, where all the potentially incoming Labour MPs were invited. The strategy was to convince the Labour Party, when they came into government, to not carry on the Tory policies. But the trouble is there was 3 terms of Thatcherism. So in the end it wasn't successful, but it was successful in a way as a model. I mean, there were tracts of lands that were saved for the community, but the People's Plan particularly is still being used as a model. I mean, that wasn't us. We just produced the design for it and all the visuals around it. But this is a research project I've just been involved in, headed up by Sue Brownell, who was from the Docklands Forum at the time. And they were looking into a whole load of different people's plans of community-led planning. So this is a really fantastic website which is documenting people's planning from the 60s onwards. So it's really worth looking at. And there's a book coming out at some point, I don't know when, I haven't finished writing it yet, but which has got examples of all those case studies. So So that's it. Thank you very much.
What is it?
Just click on index. Just do it.
No, it's index.
Index. That's it. And view. Full screen. Just bring these up. Reference documents. Hi. All right, I'm a media artist who works in worlds of net art, hacking, participatory practice, making, do it with others, and cultures of free and open source software and hardware. I've been an activist, I am an activist with the Save Cressingham campaign, the People's Audit, and more recently Refurbish, Don't Demolish, which are all housing campaigns, and I've been part of these various campaigns over the last 10 years. I was a resident of Cressingham Gardens Estate between 2006 and 2023, so I've recently moved away. And I currently lead a course in digital media, culture and technology at Royal Holloway University. Right. So I'm going to talk about my database estate project, which was artist and activist-led research into the role of databases in urban regeneration. Which sounds really boring, databases and data, but it's kind of what underpins Cressingham residents' engagement with a lot of the regeneration processes. So to give an example of such databases, Lambeth Council manages 33,000 homes, 140,000 annual repairs jobs, council expenditure, complaints, rents, tenancies, surveys, central government reporting, regeneration processes. You can see the list there, it goes on and on. There's a huge amount. It's database systems are the way that local authorities think and act and categorise their local areas, people, buildings and processes. The work I do occupies a hazy space between art, activism, academic research and everyday life, which can sometimes make it difficult to people to recognise what it is. For artists to say, is that art? Or for lawyers to go, is that a legal campaign? It's only useful for me to use those categories if it's useful. It's useful to be art if I'm going to have an exhibition or I'm speaking to curators. It's useful for something to be a legal document if I'm working for a legal process. But ultimately, my approach is I make things to make sense of things. I liked that quote by Kat Youngnickel. And I make conversations, I make programming code, I make activisms, I make objects, I make electronics, I make a lot of things. I bring theory and practice into close proximity. So while I'm observing this world of regeneration, I can't articulate it all. I haven't got the words to describe the experience of it. And I can feel myself welling up now because it's horrendous, horrific, sort of triggering experience. So for me, theoretical literature and making art becomes a way of comprehending it and finding the language to talk about this stuff or make with it. Skip that one. I'm trying to cram a 40-minute presentation into 10 minutes. So my research started in 2012, which is when Cressingham Gardens Estate came under threat of demolition, but I've been living on Cressingham since 2006. Lived there for 16 years, so I knew it well. So again, that blurring between everyday life and my lived experience. Cressingham is on the border of Brockwell Park. It's a really stunning place to live. Who wouldn't want to live there? Who would want to develop there? I was a leasehold homeowner between 2006 and 2023. That's my old sitting room. I lived there with my wife, kids, and our cat. So it's very, very personal, the work that I'm doing. Cressingham's got 306 homes, roughly 100 homeowners, 200 tenants. 6 homes have been empty since 1999. Interestingly, when the estate was first opened, it was opened by John Major. And there's a little plaque that a resident made to commemorate that event. So there's currently
50 or more empty homes because of decanting. That's what they call when they get rid of tenants. Like fine wines, we're going to decant them out of this area. There's a lack of will to repair and unknown future plans. 2012 consultation told us there was a unique opportunity to decide the future of Cressingham. And Lambeth declared themselves the UK's first cooperative council, but they didn't know what it meant. We were told there were widespread structural issues. The estate is sliding down the hill. We instigated a resident-led survey of homes, which we forced Lambeth to pay for. We wanted a full survey. They said, we'll survey 10% of homes, and it revealed that poor maintenance was the primary cause of concern. Structural issues were not a major concern, even though our local councillors were going around telling residents that the houses were all about to fall down. In 2014, I heard a housing officer say, the database told us Cressingham's too expensive to repair. And that's my research. How does a database know? There's also my activism, is finding out, well, what knowledge are they producing about the place that I live with my neighbours? Where's that data coming from? What's being produced? What's being pulled together? What's that process? And my programming mindset was sort of, right, well, I understand data. I'm going to really drill down and try and follow the logics of it. And told councillors that, well, if there are major issues or there's financial problems, then we can deal with it collaboratively. But Lambeth kept shifting the sands. They shifted the grounds of the consultation, and it became clear that they wanted to demolish. They removed options for refurbishment illegally, so we took them to court multiple times. They signed off plans to demolish 306 homes and replace with 446. That is a decision to demolish 306 homes. You're given those documents a week before there's a cabinet decision. So you have to spend all your time reading those documents. You put your life on hold to try and understand those documents, which have got an incredible level of expertise and knowledge and process embedded within them. And yet, that is a democratic process. And clearly, by the time you've got a cabinet decision, decisions have already been made. They're already pre-configured. Data has been collected in order to build and construct an argument. So how can we participate within those data gathering and structuring exercises? Going through documents like that, we worked out that the majority of new homes would be for private sale, with only 23 additional council homes. Councillors didn't even realise or understand what they were signing through. We had to tell them. They thought they were getting an extra 150 council homes. They didn't have a clue. So marches on Town Hall, going to London's Mayor's office. There's a huge amount of effort that came out of Cressingham, and we produced a People's Plan, and that's our People's Plan, which was a response to documents like that. We kind of ignored their consultation and said, well, this is what we want. So where does art come into this? Oh yeah, granted 4 judicial reviews over a 10-year period where we contested consultation processes and plans for demolition. So we had to develop this expertise as a very small group of residents. So within this live unfolding process that was literally changing day by day and attending all consultation events, I managed to get some research funding. So I undertook 40 artists and activists strategies to reveal and intervene in how repairs and maintenance databases configure decisions to demolish homes. So they're art objects, activism, technical endeavour, research, administrative tasks, or everyday life. I'm doing stuff because I don't really want to lose my home, and I'm not going to sort of fib about that. Collectively, these objects and activities paint a portrait of a lived experience of urban regeneration and how those technical systems configure that experience. So part of the work that we did on Cressingham was over 300 FOI requests. I think it might be up to 400 now. Getting hold of documents like this, where we learnt that the colour green, the number 3, the colour yellow were the cause of Cressingham being part of a regeneration programme, with no explanation of what any of that means. Attempts to comprehend how Lambeth produces repairs data. It took me 4 years to get that screenshot of the systems they use to work out how you're collecting data on us, only to find that I already had the picture in a subject access request that I'd done in my first year of research, but hadn't noticed it. I attempted to create flow charts of, well, these are the technical systems. These are how they work. But found out it was impossible to map because they're constantly changing. And councillors and council officers don't understand those systems themselves. I created historical, activist, technical and legal timelines, working in Cressingham's Rotunda, which is a community space, to help try and sort of navigate with residents the domain that we're operating in. And so trying to understand all of these acronyms, all of these different systems. Constant battles with repairs service. So this is a 27-page timeline of trying to get one repair done to my home. It took 8 years and they still didn't repair it. It's a list of the 300 plus administrative technologies involved in Lambeth's sort of management of their services. So how on earth are we supposed to comprehend what goes on when you've got this sort of scale of technology? Tried to create a diagram of democratic process and realised you've got a pretense of a sort of formal structure, but actually it's this sort of mushy mess of lots of all these different kind of things happening. I thought I was a politically savvy individual going to marches. I realised I didn't have a clue how democratic systems work. Service charge meetings, 2 minutes, here we go. Let's go. Let's put the speed on. Identified 200 suspect repairs working with residents. So we did have service charge meetings. Created spreadsheets and took them to the head of finance, saying, is this how you're structuring your housing data? Invented the acronym HARMS to account for more than technical complexities as a way to talk about these housing systems that I could never get a handle on or get an idea of what they were. So it's a housing asset repairs management system. So I kind of use humour amongst myself and residents to talk about these systems we're engaging with. Built weird objects, strange contraptions as a different way to speak with residents about how repairs works, to work out, can we contest repairs? Can we develop strategies to go against the council? Built a trailer for my kids because I was doing the labour of parenting with my wife. And I added a little platform with a laptop on it and then attached a camera and attached all these different bits so we could audit repairs around the estate. Exposed £127,000 worth of suspect repairs in a 2-year period. And council officers couldn't cope with the volume of data that we generated and sent back to them, and they responded with legal threats. I managed to recreate Lambeth's housing database systems and could start to write my own database queries. So this is an algorithm of urban regeneration, sort of finding which are the most expensive estates to repair. Explored service charge bills as a material manifestation of these database technologies. And created lots of code.
Your call may be recorded.
They're sort of working code. So this grabs data from people's service charge bills while playing back recordings of Lambeth's on hold sort of messages you get while you're trying to report repairs. So that's actually lime. I tried to sort of tread this line to, I want art that's going to do something. And I'm always asking, is this going to be useful? As well as amusing myself and others. Last one. This is the shadow database.
To read, but this first,
which is a recreation of Lambeth's housing database. It's online at the moment. So you can search data. So this is a working interface. And you've got data on every single housing estate in Lambeth.
To redevelop Cressenham Gardens
I could look at individual properties and get data for those properties.
Made a decision to demolish their estate.
And that was through a huge number of different
housing
FOI
estate
requests.
consists of 306
to amuse myself, I tried to
privately owned.
record a video of the whole of Cressingham Gardens estate. So when you navigate individual properties, the video takes you to that
really
property.
happy.
To try and sort of connect to
completely
it.
vindicated.
So sort of, treading this line between something useful and then doing this sort of strange.
It's a real pleasure that the
things.
judge was able to get some insight into the frustrations that we've experienced over the last 3 years.
Just bring my listeners up to speed. It all came because there was.
Hi, I'm Aysen Dennis.
and I've been campaigning on Aylesbury Estate last 25 years. And I moved to Aylesbury Estate 93, and 99 we start getting letters from council stating that they were gonna move us out, and then they're gonna make a nice building for us and we're all gonna move it back, you know, all those lies. So I attended a couple of their meetings to find out what it is. And of course it's a privatization, of course it's a, you know, the transfer tenancy. So I immediately approached someone I know to say that we have to start a campaign here. And since then, I've been campaigning. And 2001, we had a ballot, because it's been, you know, the transfer tenancy, but they don't tell us what is waiting for us. It's just, you know, the people are on limbo and not knowing what is going to happen. And we were going to the council meeting to getting a deputation, but immediately I realized it is just for the council, tick off the boxes. They don't care and they don't even listen what you are trying to tell them. So I gave up to talking to council. Then we had the ballot. We won the ballot. The 73% of tenants said no to privatization. We want to stay with council, and the council should be doing repair and maintenance. Even on the day the ballots are being counted and being told that we won, someone from the opposite side, he came and told me, do you think you won? We are coming back. And yes, they did come back, because the idea has been put by them. 97, we had Tony Blair came to our estate to talk about, you know, you forgotten people which giving the green lights for the privatization. So our democratic votes has been put aside, and they still come to the people, trying to bring people from outside to so-called under the consultation process. And some of the bribed tenants were working with them, yes, but others, they don't, and they've been trying to sell off is a future dream to people, and having a glossy magazines and CDs 25 years ago, edge door getting to saying that everything is gonna be very nice for you if you just move out, just get out. End of the day, because we are working class people, and we are occupying the land in the zone 1. And of course they don't want us to keep that land there. So we did not have proper consultation. Everything is what they say to consultation. They are not consulting people. They are just getting some bribe tenants, and everything is under the behind closed doors. We were not allowed to get in those meetings. If we find out where they are having a meeting, we are not allowed, because everything, they already said it, this place has to be demolished, and we're gonna build up nice building for the rich people, hipsters, you know, all those things. They deserve to live next to the park and zone 1, and we working class people, according to them, if you don't have enough money, you don't count as a human being. Excuse me, who are you? How dare them to tell us what we need to do? We already know what is it good for us as a community, because as an Aylesbury community, the Aylesbury has got 2,700 flats. It's almost 10,000 people live there. It's a small town. What is common in us, in there, because we all are minority ethnic people. We are facing racism all over, everywhere. But in our community, we know what it means to face racism, and we don't get that in our community. And of course, it's the sexism, because mainly in the community, women are connecting, making the networks. And our building has been built very thoughtfully. You know, the people, the wide corridors, people, children can play and people can chat and socialize in the corridors. And what they are offering us, high-rise flats, and if some of us, which I am one of them, unfortunately, I have to force to move out after 30 years in my flat to the new place, but is still in the Aylesbury Estate area. So the consultants are white middle-class people. They have no idea what is happening in our community, and those people are coming to consult us and getting high paid. I'm sorry, because they have to talk to us. We live there. And it is affecting people's mental health, because you don't know, you are always living in a limbo. You want to do something nice, your home, because it is your home. You express yourself in your home, who you are, with your picture, with how you put your furniture, everything. That is you. And you can't do much because we don't have much money to spare and do this and that. So you have to keep waiting and doing small things in order to keep your home properly. In 2015, we had occupied the empty blocks after the March 31st of January, which is the 10th year, is tomorrow. Occupied some buildings, and we stayed there for 2 months. And the second day, council immediately calling me about the squatters because they knew I am involved with them. Of course I was. So we stayed there and immediately get it boarded up, and then all the spikes put, and how many thousands, 7,000 pounds council spent just for us. And then they, the dog units, like we are trying to protect our community, not attacking our community, but the mentality, because they wanted to show us we don't work. Even media, it's always, the help in this kind of things. They are not working, they are all criminal, they use drugs and this and that. And I lived there proudly 30 years, and I haven't come across with anything, but they suddenly hearing this and that happening in there. No, if it happens everywhere. It's not just on Aylesbury Estate. So that is the media play a good part on putting Aylesbury Estate down to people who live there. Then they took us to court on my name, of course. Yes, we lost it, but we had a nice march, and I would advise all of you to watch on the YouTube, because we pulled down the fences. The council made it, all the security inside, to find it very difficult to understand how we did it. But previous night, we cut everything slowly, and then after the demo, we just pull it down to show that, yes, we are. I am more in activist side of it, taking an action, not talking and trying to convince people, because only way left for us to occupy it everywhere and saying that is enough, what you are doing to people. And I've been asking as an architect or student, because if you don't take your part, which side you are gonna be on, you'll be used by those so-called architects to draw toilet and bathroom, nothing else. You have to take your side where you're gonna be. You have to build a building for people, not to demolish people's houses. So you should be gathering together, getting in the campaign groups wherever you live, and asking them, supporting them, and writing a letter to council to saying that this is wrong, what you've been doing, because every level of the society has get affected and has a responsibility to support us in a solidarity. Not just our problem, it's society's problem to sort it out, to make more council housing for the low-income people to live peacefully. Have I?
Yes,
Okay. I will just pass on to my friend because I've been willing to make an exhibition in my flat in order to show that how nicely made those flats are. And it was going a few years, and eventually I bothered them a lot, and I've been just, nagging on and on. They said, okay, let's sit down and talk, and start it. And then thankfully our Alessia, who's our creator, took over and made a brilliant exhibition. Alessia.
Hi, I'm gonna start briefly with a brief introduction of what I do as a photographer in general. So my work has been focused on ongoing regeneration and consequent loss of identity of London, and I'm interested in finding the connection between council estate demolition, criminalization of squatting, and marginalization of low-income community. So by doing this, I met Aysen, and we became friends over the years. Oops. And that's why I've been, 2 years ago, I've been involved in this exhibition, Fight for Aylesbury. So it was an Aysen idea a desire to make this exhibition, to pay tribute to her sister Pinar, and also to celebrate 25 years of struggle for the estate. And by organizing an exhibition in her flat, open to the public. Oops, sorry. Is it not going? Okay. So, since Aysen continued to live inside the flat during the exhibition, everything remained in place, and it became part of the exhibition itself. So each room in the flat represented a topic related to regeneration. So there, for instance, there was the mental health room, there was the council room, which was the toilet, with customized toilet paper with the Southwark logo on it. And then the bookcase in the living room became the occupied building in 2015. And then the bathroom became a one-person cinema that played the history of the estate, and so on. So every element was part of the exhibition. And it mixed with the big history of the fight over the 25 years. Oh, sorry, I keep on. I'm a bit clumsy. I have to go. No, I have to go back. Okay. So in this context, I create a series of collages, putting together like the large quantity of material that I gather from activists, residents, supporters. All this material is being collected over those 25 years of fight, and it's very various and heterogeneous. And with this, I cover almost every wall in the flat. And the visual density and content density wanted to symbolize the weight of the struggle and of the fight on everyday life of the resident. Oh, sorry. So the exhibition was the result of a collective process that brought together Aylesbury residents, supporters, and people who joined along the way. It has grown more and more over the time, with academics contributing with writing, artists and supporters with song, videos, poems, sound composition, and floral installation. During the month of the opening, it became a space to meet, discuss, get to know each other, which is what Aysen Flat always represent over the years. And at the end, it turned out to be a place to relaunch a campaign that had been dormant for a while. So we are working on an online version of the flat. Well, we are wished to start working on this online version. It's going to take a long time, and we haven't started yet. And the idea is to create an open archive online and a virtual flat that everyone can access from every part of the world. So at this point, I would like to mention another reality in which I'm involved in. And starting by saying that local authorities and developers use art and culture on the basis of commercial and economic returns, often as a pretext around which to clean up areas before relaunching them in the property market. And because artists generally live in precariousness, and art organizations are like badly underfunded, they're more likely to be involved in this kind of regeneration process because it's where the money comes from. So art, it became the synonymous of gentrification, regeneration, and potential displacement. The role of artists in this urban regeneration can take different forms, and the reality I'm involved in is the case of the artist guardianship, where artist communities offer temporary and affordable accommodation in empty buildings awaiting demolition in areas undergoing regeneration. In this case, developers use artists to interact with local community to provide services in form of workshop or other activities, while the government looks for solutions to cut public spending. What is produced, it's completely... Thanks. No, it's the previous one, yeah. What is produced is completely deprived of any antagonistic component, and is sponsored by the developer as a socially committed art, with all the rhetoric of inclusion, social impact, community development. So with the excuse of celebrating local community, it contributes to art wash processes and on behalf of developers. And ultimately, art is going to be displaced together with the local communities. So this is just to frame a reality, and open up a conversation with you, if you want to. And on this note, I would like to close the presentation with this quote from Rab Arling, that is an artist used to be a tenant of Balfron Tower under the Beaux Arts guardianship scheme, and he say property developers-led agendas do not serve artists, and they do not serve communities. They are turning communities against artists, exposing us for exactly what we have become, the shock troop of gentrification.
Before we open it up to the floor, Loraine has a sort of provocation and a question for you, the audience.
Oh, well, it was just a question about the Docklands Community Poster Project, which was decades old and couldn't happen now. I mean, communities are still organising now, so that part of it can happen, but there isn't the same funding opportunity now. You know, we lived in short life housing. There was the GLC putting funding into the arts. There were other radical arts committees. So the funding couldn't happen. The technology has changed. Well, how would you do it now? I mean, would it be social media? I don't know. I'm not very good on social media. But, I mean, you wouldn't do billboards now, I don't think. Billboards at the time was a way of getting messages out to the public, but I'm not sure that's the medium now. So I'm just interested, particularly for the younger people in the audience, if they would have ideas of how you would approach something like that in the present day. Because I don't know.
Hello. Thank you for the talk. And I think part of what made the activism so successful as well was the fact that your community had involved young people and got them engaged. And something to take advantage of is that, especially students as well, I mean, we're busy, but you know, we have so much energy, we'll throw ourselves at any task at any given point. And I think you mentioned that as you had art societies and art groups from all across, like, join in and take part. So relying on every generation to take part and to engage is probably the best way. And even if you feel like your skills specifically aren't in social media, or with whatever current tech we have now, there are young people that are very much more willing to help, willing to collab, societies and universities. And just being able to have a moment to talk like you are doing here enables them to start thinking, and there will be people that are very much interested who will get their friends to come along. Before you know it, you have an army of, hundreds of students who, you give them just a little direction, a bit of nudge, they'll make something you would never have expected. And that's just one part of the community. So yeah, thank you.
Very interesting, yeah. Great.
Hi, my name is Anita and I live in Deptford, and I'm part of housing campaigns there. And so some of the things that we did was we did still actually paste posters all over the place wherever we could, particularly around the hoardings of where developments were taking place, like drawings. So art and culture actually played a massive role in those campaigns. So, the campaigns is actually made up mostly of kind of community artists, so many of whom actually come from that period that you come from, sort of community arts and activism of the 80s. But, there is obviously social media, but there is still, we print a lot of leaflets. You can get leaflets printed for really cheap. Like we got 5,000 leaflets for something like £50. We do crowdfunding. We had a lot of creative workshops, like drawing workshops, painting workshops, photography workshops, where people could leave donations. That's just some of the things I can think of for now. But actually pasting posters is actually still really useful.
That's really interesting. Yes, there are ways, and they're still happening. And also we have crowdfunding now, which we didn't have then, which is...
I definitely agree that posters are really important. I think it was quite iconic, the friends and neighbours abandoned by Labour on Cressingham Gardens railings, which were continually taken down and just put them straight back up. Because a lot of people living on the estates didn't have access to computers. You think everyone must have a phone. A lot of older people, that just don't have access to those technologies. So it's really important that you've got as many different media kind of formats as possible, I think.
And actually, I do remember a couple of other things, but because we were working a lot with artists as well, and they all have their own kind of working mechanisms. So people had access to printers where they could print for free. Another person could print photographs or whatever. And we also, there's a local arts festival, and at the time when the campaign was at its highest point, the arts festival had a director who we knew, and so we could apply for funding, and he was really politically engaged as well. You couldn't do it now with the current director, but at the time, and then we got the funding there as well. Yeah. I personally used I had research funding from my PhD, and I used some of the money there for the campaign as well. So there's always little ways of getting money together.
It's collaborating, isn't it?
It is, in the end.
And also, it's not just, the money-wise, the leafleting and postering and drawing comics and telling the story with the drawing and making it simple for everyone to understand, because the English is people's second languages. So you need to be aware of it, how you put the words through to people, because art for people, not for people not to understand. It's easy for everyone to reach and understand. That's what we did. And all along, it get to the people.
I think that's really important also about your work, and I'm really interested in the same thing, this question of how do you represent information that is too complex to access for most people, whether it's a language barrier or it's the sort of the background or it's specialisms and so on, and how can artists, that's what I do, and I think that's what you do in a different way. How can you come in there and really sort of try and close that gap in some way, that there is a communication of that stuff, because people do need to be in the know, because how can they make an informed decision if they don't really understand what's being discussed? So I think...
And the consultation process just increasingly marginalises people and excludes, because fewer and fewer people can understand it. There's a core group on Cressingham that really understand the intricacies of everything, that have got a greater depth of knowledge than a lot of the housing officers and the councillors, because it's just, there's an archive within this lived experience, and then suddenly it's a group of four of you, and you've got all this knowledge and you can't communicate it to everybody, and that's the nature of that process. And in a way, as soon as you communicate one thing, there's one sort of thing about the cost, how much rents are going to go up, you drill into that data, it's already changed, and they've changed their strategy. So it's there's a massive structural issue with the consultation and the nature of who's got control over data and those figures, who gets to decide what's important, and that's fundamentally reconfiguring relationships between a local authority and residents. How do we get to decide? And that's way before architects are brought in, designers, who are the caretakers of the environments that we live in, and who gets to make decisions. And I think it needs to be in the hands of residents.
Yes, but it is the councils, and all the councillors are either, the lobbying for the developers, or later on going and working with developers, so they don't care. Early 20s years old, has got his own places, has no idea how we live within the community, can easily say that, it has to be demolished. I had to stop that person because he has no right to talk at his age, at his experiences, and coming and telling us that, what is good for us, like we do not know what is good for us. So ignorant. So I stopped listening to councillors, and I've been saying that we should be open in the society, discuss why are we voting for those councillors. They are getting voted to serve the community, not to destroy the community. If you are not serving the community, if you are not getting my homes, repair and maintenance, what is it you are doing there? So let the developers appoint them. Why are we using this so-called our vote to experience our, the democratic rights? There is no democracy. If the voting will be affecting anything, they could have banned the voting. So it's just, we keep telling each other, I changed the government. Yes, we see what Labour is doing, same and worse.
But I think that's a really important question, the question about how do we as artists or cultural practitioners relate to the given structures. I think you got really close to those structures, and they got a little bit worried about the things that you were telling them about their own structures that they didn't know about. So there was a kind of direct engagement. You're sort of saying, I don't even want to talk to them. Maybe that's a question for everybody. How closely do you engage with that system, or do you sort of create your own parallel system also in terms of consultation? Do you just run your own events? Do you just run your whole own setup? Yes. Or do you go and sort of try and infiltrate?
we do our own way of consultation, petitioning, going door to door, talking to people. If they don't speak the language, we find out who speaks their own language. To simplify the idea, what is happening to us, not using too much, the people cannot understand this, I'm not saying to you, but most academics likes, not to be understand. No, I'm sorry. You have to simplify to make people understand. Who are you? What are you trying to do with me? So and then the explaining people, having a public meetings, to letting them to talk what they want. So why would I talk to councillors and still trying to engage with them, because they already has a setup idea to demolish, gentrify, not, gentrify and socially cleanse the area. So I have to fight. I will fight, I will occupy it everywhere, I resist the occupation that's the way we can win. That's the only way left for us. I'm sorry, they are not listening.
Wait, can I just, we do have somebody who's desperate to...
Yeah, hello.
Okay, my name's Yang, and not exactly desperate, but quite.
Can I use that? Can I use that? Okay. So I was going to contribute to the discussion of how do artists today, young people, approach to the public and communities. Are we still on topic or? Okay. So I recently did a project with my friends in China. So we have this mega application on cell phone that's called WeChat. So it's all encompassing for everything, banking, digital payment and communication, social media and everything. So when you engage community, when you engage people, you engage them through WeChat. And it is because this digital landscape that is built on WeChat, that is unifying everything, it also creates, stunningly, a consistency of everyday life in cyberspace. That's how we operate. We operate through the consistency provided by the authority, installed by big corporate like Alibaba, like the cloud capital, and to re-establish everyday life. So engage people through WeChat. Like it's like the conventional door-to-door interview to get people to establish our network and recreate an everyday life, bring everyday life in the cyberspace back to reality. And we start visiting people physically, door to door, and we live sort of together. We invite them to dinner, the dinner party, and to recreate a community life. And then we approach, there's a second level. At that stage, we ask them to decide what kind of method they want to use in communication, in organizing others in the community. So there's a two-level. The first one, we engage our participants, and then we all decide how we communicate, and each of us find our own network to bring in more people into the consistency of everyday life. We hybridize everyday life, two everyday life into one. So it's kind of interesting. I just feel right to share experience from China.
Thank you.
Right, cheers.
I think that there's another question over here.
Hello, thank you. I'm here because of my professional, amazing tutor, Miss Loraine. And why I'm here, because I follow her, what she is doing. Finally, I realized that I'm activist artist. I didn't know I'm activist artist, the title. I'm a live example of language barrier because I'm Iranian and English is my second language. And unfortunately, I missed most of the, the conversation you say, because I do my best to understand. I try, but unfortunately I miss what you say. But nothing stopped me. I'm in third year in fine art student in Middlesex University. You know, I want to share my experience with you. You know, we had placement with Miss Loraine, and we had to have a placement. But I was really keen to do it. The first session, I asked Miss Loraine, can I have 2 placements? She said, are you ready for 2 placements? I said, yeah. And I was involved with 2 placements. And the first placement was involved with 2 campaigns with Citizen UK, with asylum seekers about food and quality of food. And the second one was about the free bus for asylum seekers. And I was involved with the other placement, which was Kilburn project, like Docklands, something like that. And you ask how we can, you know, show what's our problem. Sorry, my English is too bad. But, you know, I just created, Mr. Blue from Citizen UK asked me, you as an artist, how can help us and create piece of art to show that the asylum seekers are suffering about food, housing, and I said, okay, give me 4 more important. And he told me food, travel, housing, and health problem, and mental health or health issue. I said, okay. Then suddenly I called him and I said, can I see you? Can I see you? He said, yeah, that's fine. What's happened? I said, please, please. And I said, okay, I want to make, I created a big clock. And at the 12, I put food. At 3, I put housing. At 3, I put at 6, sorry. 6, I put a travel, and at 8, I put health. And I had, you know, I created this clock, the real clock, and I designed it because I do wall design and I know some techniques. Then I went to the Council of Barnet in Colindale, and I had just 30-second speech in front of the mayor of Barnet to set and represent their issue with the asylum seekers. And I said, excuse me, just believe me, 9 o'clock is too late. Instead of dedicating money for, you know, mental issue, you need to solve the, you know, at the 12 was the food. Please think about the quality of food, think about the housing, think about the travel. Then if you dedicate this money to these 3 you know, numbers, then people, they don't get any mental issue. And you don't need to dedicate money for their mental issue. Then believe me, 12 o'clock, it's too late. And yeah, and this clock was in the news in the university, and it was effective for that issue. That's fine.
I think that picking up on the mental health issue is really important, and it came to me seeing how emotionally how emotional you became talking about this, and how close this is as your work, as your research, as your daily life. And it's definitely something that we are teaching about consultation, or about the depoliticization, or the removal of any kind of agency that residents have. But it's not a mental health issue, and it's not, it sort of remains a passion. But I think that it is really important to think about the toll that this takes. And in an architecture school, really touching on what you were speaking about, that this is about choosing people's lives. It's not about designing a house. And I hope that this panel has made that really very clear.
every time a letter comes through the door from the council and opening up, there's my neighbour, and as we describe it, it's like PTSD. It's triggering. It just sort of creates a huge adrenaline sort of rush because you know, oh my God, right, that's my next 2 weeks of going over that document, FOI requests, and it's just, and you've got your life to lead, and you've got work and all of these kinds of sort of things. So yeah, the mental health toll is absolutely huge. You know, I feel guilty about the fact that I've left Cressingham because I'm so aware of people's continued lived experience there. You know, I mean,
and on top, I'm sorry, but the repair and maintenance
Yeah.
never ever take place.
Yeah.
Because it is a way of getting the tenants to say, I had enough, I had to move out. Because
Yeah.
it's 30 years. They haven't touched anything in our Aylesbury Estate. So it's everywhere. It's the leak, the the cockroaches, some of the houses, mice, and it's just, it became uninhabitable. Unfortunately, no matter how much you love your flat, and I came to the point that, in one day, 11 of mice from the window, everywhere in my house, that was it. And I've been just giving it way that, either you take this or you put yourself intentionally homeless. And living all those years, you don't know what is happening. And it's affecting people mentally, and the GPs are telling that they are full of mental health because due to housing, which I always talk to the therapist when I had the meeting, and I tell them, you need to ask people if they are going through gentrification in their houses. That's the only way you can identify, because minority ethnic people will not be identified what is causing their depression. So it's up to whoever sees them to pinpoint what is affecting those people, and everyone is affected this mentally.
There's a big research project that's been done on the Aylesbury to investigate the impact of housing precarity on mental health.
Which I invite them to. I reminded them that, as a therapist, they need to be with people. That's what I'm asking everyone. If you are an architect, you have to work with the community activists, with the community, not the money-making architects. That is full stop. And your teacher is saying that, the activism, that is your activism has to come to the campaign groups and do things together and use your knowledge, saying that these houses sound good, why are you knocking down? And especially now, under the circumstances, we have the global warming, and knocking down the estates is causing the damage and rebuilding it. We have to measure every single thing and then act accordingly. We've been losing the green areas all over, and everywhere is becoming concrete, low, high rises. No, where I moved, people can shake hands from one building to other building. No lights, nothing. And they already know that, but they don't give a damn about it. Because at the end of the day, they said it. I heard it in the council meeting. They said, oh, they don't get a daylight, they can put the light, but we can put the elderly people. Is this the way to treat a human being? No. I'm sorry.
Has anybody else contribute? We have a few minutes left.
Hi, thank you for your presentations. I have 2 points and possible 2 solutions for you to discuss. So the first one's on value, the other one's on representation. So I'll address the value one because of your archive. It is possible to put something like a smart contract on works that you've already produced, like your posters, so that if it's sold as like an artwork, you could get like 10% going to a campaign, or just so that it can generate some kind of money. Because going back to Rob Harling's point, artists are going where the money is, and they'd gladly go to a developer to, you know, paint a wall or work with the community to kind of improve their PR. So these are something like, there's some like a new kind of, it's just a contract which is, every time it's sold on, even if it loses money, you still get like 10, 20% going to like different important causes that you want to support, right? And also generate some kind of revenue. The second thing is on representation. Then I'm going to not quote Jane McAlevey, but she's a union activist in Philadelphia, I think. She recently passed away. Connecting issues at work with issues in their communities. So in America, there'd be like clearing out the areas where Black and Latino communities are living and regenerating it. So she was like connecting their issues at home with their work issues, because the same communities were getting shafted by big corporations to work for less hours and with not less pay but really bad working conditions. So she was able to connect the two, and every time that there even was a small housing issue, there'd be like about 1,000, 2,000 people coming to churches to say this is wrong. There are other alternatives to look at. And then suddenly when the politicians saw that, they were like, 2,000 people, this is bad for us, so we actually have to do something. Now in Lambeth, they still get 2,000 votes, right? Whereas if you break those 2,000 votes down to like 10 votes here, 20 votes here, 50 votes here, that's easily possible. And force them to not do the bidding of a future employer. Those are my 2 points.
Thank you. Yeah, I think if we have one last contribution.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me? Yes. I wanted to kind of bring a slightly different perspective, on the contrary, when an entire artistic generation misses a moment in which they can radically define the conversations that are happening. I come from the Czech Republic, from Prague, and when kind of when communism fell and everything in the late 80s, early 90s, what happened was that there was this rampant wave of privatization of literally anything imaginable. And what happened, I'll give you an example of my grandma. She lived in the same property since the 70s in this little council flat. And what was happening was that every single flat in every single kind of council estate was being sold off. You could buy it as a tenant at market value, or what most often used to happen, people from the outside would buy your flat and suddenly you were a tenant to a private entity. What this meant was that then the entire market went completely rogue and people kind of went completely unnoticed for decades because the market kind of stabilized itself very quickly, but obviously that kind of led to a big moment where we are experiencing right now in Czech Republic over the last 10 years where rents are going completely out of control. Councils have zero control over the rent levels, and this is, for example, led to my grandma being evicted. She is a very vulnerable kind of elderly person, and she had to kind of move completely out of the city, out of the neighborhood she used to live in. And only now the artists are kind of catching up and realizing that a mistake that happened 30 years ago has caused such a huge ripple effect throughout all of society in the urban fabric that everyone kind of lives in. It is interesting to see how kind of, in that sense, ideology, kind of the revolution and the democratization of a society suddenly leads everyone to kind of forget what can happen further down the line, but there's certain implications of certain actions that might be happening. Everyone was happy that there was freedom, there was opportunity, but at the same time that vastness of opportunity led to people basically exactly kind of cleansing entire neighborhoods. The moment that the council identified an opportunity there, use the few properties they had left, usually kind of for commerce, to kind of implant certain companies that would then make it much cooler as a neighborhood, raise rents, and all of the private tenants would of course raise rents, leading to all of the kind of problematic people to be kind of kicked out of their properties that they couldn't pay rent. So yeah, it's more a sad thing, not really a thing of hope, but at least now artists are catching up and kind of organizing huge campaigns throughout Prague and the Czech Republic for this purpose.
Thank you. I know that there is one more contribution over here. Is that right? and then we can close it.
Yeah, I guess ending on a more lighter note, but coming back to the earlier point made about engaging with the community and kind of bringing the art and voices of the people. I love the passion shown by you by kind of saying that developers don't think about that and kind of the day-to-day life of the person, and kind of in these kind of big regeneration plans, how can you think about the future without understanding the past of the people? You can't, and kind of trying to plan for that and not understanding the people's perspective doesn't seem to make sense. And I did a project about a year ago with some children and their families, and they were kind of taken around a map of their local area and kind of with the children's experience, with the parents, and kind of that cyclical nature in their day-to-day life. And the developers were taken on this route, and the children and the parents drew memories and pictures of different places around the site and around their estate. And it kind of, I feel like it opened the eyes more of the developers of who they were dealing with and who were the people that they were designing for. And it was nice to see those conversations and of the children, because I feel like they would never see those stories or hear those stories, especially from the children, and the boldness of their drawings and the stories told. And I think that's kind of the area and the ideas that are lacking when developers and big corporations think about plans. They don't hear the stories and the day-to-day life of people and children and families and, yeah, just the people.
Yeah, thank you.
So, yeah.
I think it's a hopeful note, or a hopeful idea to think that the developers will be impacted by the stories of the children. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, especially the speakers. And good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.